Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Board of Life and Growth here at Salem. We kind of are the instigators of this. This is our kickoff event for the year, this being the 100th anniversary of the laying of the cornerstone for the sanctuary. So we're going to try and have several events during the year, so keep tuned, just to keep in mind our history and our heritage, and all that went into the building of this sanctuary that we call our home church. So we're very glad you're here, and very importantly, there's refreshments afterwards downstairs. Thank you for coming.
So we want to wish Kathy Nelson a happy birthday today. We're talking about the building, but I look around and I see there's a lot of people who are institutions in themselves in the work they've done in this community, and I'll share more of that when I introduce Virginia. But I know Kathy has done so much for music, and when we were talking about this, there were a couple songs that Virginia thought we should sing, and I had one. She goes, "No, that's too contemporary." And so she picked two because she was the music director for a long time, and I never wanted to second guess her opinion. And so we're going to start with, they're on the hymn boards, "Joy to the World." So I look around the room today, and folks who have gathered, and at first I thought, man, I don't think it'd be a protest if I said I'm the youngest one in the room. But then, well, Melinda, you're not the youngest either. I think we have Laura Gardner, who, in scanning the group, is probably the youngest in the room. And I think that's a blessing and a challenge, because I am one who have been here now for 3 years, and when I first was discerning my call to this church, one of the things that I saw on your website and in my first visit is this is such a beautiful facility. And, you know, it's so well kept up. And I actually heard some of the stories that we're going to hear today from our first group of confirmants who were telling me about some of the unique pieces of this building. And so it's worthwhile to gather, even though I've only been here for 3 years and know pieces of this story, to have it rehearsed again today and with Virginia, who is also my neighbor. And when I'm out doing yard work or anything at the house, Virginia will come out and say, "Hey, Joel." And I go, "Oh no, I'm not going to get my work done. I got to go see Virginia." She'll tell me stories of my house when she's young, watching them dig the foundation of the house that I'm in. You know, so she's this wealth of information and knowledge and deep compassion and love for this church. And then I realized what she did here as music director for so many years, and singing in the choir now with Kathy, to find out from folks who started in you know, the nursery school choirs to have been raised up and you know, when Nancy and I would sing in the choir and say, "Man, Kathy Nelson could be a little tough on us on rehearsal," and said, "You weren't under the leadership of Virginia." Because just the quality of music was so good. That's why I dare not suggest hymns and let Virginia share them here. So our next hymn is "This Is My Father's World," 824. So I spend a fair amount of time here in this building with numbers of different groups. I'll be meeting at 7 o'clock tonight with the youth group. I was here Friday with a family, the funeral of Joel Bach. And one thing that I get to hear that I don't get to share in public is when people talk about just the impact this building has on them. And as we finished up the funeral services and I was in my office preparing for something else, I could hear someone who was not from this community just walk through the halls and say, "This is such an amazing church." And it's so beautiful. They come into the sanctuary and they said, I just feel a sense of peace here. And of course, I think when so many sacred things happen in a space, I think that space just kind of takes on that legacy. And so I understood exactly what that person was saying when they came in and said, for such a small town, this is such an amazing building. And of course, for generations, this was the first place, the sacred place, the place where everybody expected to feel God's presence. And so for us to know that we tell that story, we cherish that, and we only hope and pray we can figure out how to translate that to the next generations and pastors that come along. That is both the legacy and the honor and the challenge. It's one that Virginia has been doing in this sacred space for 80, 60, lots of years. 90? Yeah, 93 years, yeah. So Virginia, thank you for that and for wanting so much to tell this story today. So Virginia, please, don't let me take up your time. We're ready.
Okay. All right.
I did promise to have a prayer.
That's okay. We'll say it now.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, gracious and Heavenly Father, we give you thanks that this is a place that's filled with signs and symbols and memories of heartache and joy and meaning. So as we gather in this place today, help us be mindful of those who have cared for it, those who have shared the story, and those who will continue to share this word in the days to come. We give you thanks for Virginia and the work she has done here and the oral legacy she now shares with us, and that we may share it and take that on and send it to the next generation. So be with us now as we remember the light and life that shines through Virginia and the grace found in this place. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to see so many people that are interested in this beautiful place. I know that you think that I am as old as this church. But I'm not, and I'm still getting the chance to talk to you about these wonderful symbols that are here in this church. Now, when you wonder how come I know that, is that my parents were custodians here for 17 years when I was partly in high school, and I used to come over here and help them. I dusted the pews, I worked whatever they wanted me to. They never had to ask me twice because I loved to come over here and work. And so then my sister Fern was here for 20 years in the 70s and around in there. And she loved children. And the children got to know her as Fern, and it just was precious, and that they thought so much of her. And so she was, we used to talk together about this church. And then, of course, I was director for so many years, so my family was very acquainted with the church. Now, Thorvald Thorson was the architect of this church. And he was from Forest City. He was the science teacher at the Waldorf College, and he just dreamed architecture. And he took correspondence courses. He read and read and read, and I think he was pretty much self-taught as an architect. Now, he was a devout Christian man, and a lot of the symbols in this church are his. And they were very meaningful symbols. And the first one we're going to talk about is the windows. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is the one in the narthex, because that's the birth of Jesus, or the incarnation. And for a long time, I wondered what the incarnation word meant. So I know I found out here in church, but you know, it doesn't stick. So I just opened the dictionary and I looked it up. And there it says in a simple sentence, when God came down to earth as man, and so Jesus was born. Okay, now we're going to go, and so remember the birth of Jesus out there, it used to be in the balcony. That's what it was originally, because this man put the gospel of Jesus Christ into the windows. So now we have the birth of Christ. Then it went on the sides, we have the apostles who wrote about the life of Christ. And then up here, we have the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So now we have the gospel, the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's a wonderful symbol to remember. Now, the windows are, if you use your imagination now, see, they're in the form of butterfly wings. I think all of them are like that. Now you can say, why a butterfly? Well, if you've ever watched a butterfly hatch, and without any ado, never having flown before, it can just talk straight up into the air and fly right into the blue. And it's a good symbol of the resurrection. Now, can I turn my back to you here? Underneath the windows are 4 small windows. 4 small windows. Now, they are really decorative windows, but the first 3 are imperfect. But the one under Christ is perfect. Now that's a good thing for you to ponder on a Sunday morning. Say, imperfect people and a perfect Christ. Now that's the architect's symbol. He was good at this. Now we're going to come down to I'll take this butterfly that's supposed to be here. There's a little tiny butterfly around the area of the hem of the gown of Jesus. And it's just a little butterfly. And it's been talked about for years. And some people say they have seen it, and I know for sure I have not. I've stood there many minutes, and I cannot see a butterfly in there. It would be etched right into the glass. But I'm sure you're very welcome to come up here. Wouldn't that be a surprise if the pastor found all of you standing here looking at the window? But I think it's true, but maybe we'll find some information when we go into the safe. Okay, now we're going to come down to the Da Vinci's Last Supper. The painting of that but this is a sculpture of it. The Last Supper. Now, when Pastor Dalen was here, he called my husband, who was an artist, and he said, the head of one of the disciples is missing. Not missing, but knocked off. And he said, is it possible you could come over and see if you could fix it? So Floyd took off with his trusty glue and his paints and came over here. And we only live a couple blocks away, so I was getting more curious and more curious about what was going on. So I walked over here, and there he was, pondering the work he had done and pondering the Last Supper. So I walked up and said, how are you doing? Well, and he didn't tell me which disciple it was. I couldn't tell, so he must have done a good job. But then we both decided that it must have been Judas, because Judas lost his head when he sold Jesus. So we don't know which one it was. Well, I think I could probably tell you, but we can't know. Anyway, that's what happened, and we can't imagine how it got knocked off. It was laying down on the altar, so he had the head to work with. Okay, now we come to the eternal light. Now, the eternal light is in a beautiful red glass around it. And the eternal life is God's eternal life. He never leaves us. He never deserts us, ever. And so this light, and the symbol of this is that that light never goes out, ever, ever, ever goes out, as a remembrance of God's light. Now, next to it is the cross, a beautiful cross. Now, the cross is the strongest symbol that we have. And it's all over the church. You would see the cross everywhere. Now, if you were on top of the church looking down, you would see that the church is in the form of a cross. Interesting. Now we come down to, let's see now. Okay, we're at the Holy Communion railing here. Don't think I missed anything there. The what? The what?
The IHS is older.
Can't know that. I'll come back to it. Okay, this is the Holy Communion, and when like when I was in high school, the three symbols, of course. The three symbols down on the bottom of the altar is what he said. Forgot them. It's kind of interesting because I was maybe junior high. My girlfriend and I came over here just fooling around here. We just liked it. We came here to see things. And we saw that IHS, and we said, my friend said, I think it means I hate sin. Well, I thought that was a pretty good thing. But then it is actually Greek words for Jesu hominum salvator, meaning Jesus, Savior of men. But then I wondered why the architect would put that down so far, because you can't see it. But then, if you were kneeling at the altar, your eyes would come right down to it, Jesus, Savior of men. So it's a very important symbol. Okay, now, let's see, I'll come back to this other part. This is the Holy Communion we're talking about. This is like when I was in high school. When we had communion about twice a year. And so there were a lot of people who came for communion. But we had to register for communion. So we go in, there was a long line of people, go into the sacristy here, and the pastor would be sitting there, and we had to register to go to communion. Well, that was okay, that was what we did. Well then, these are large communion tables, because we only had, communion twice a year maybe. And so we didn't have enough glasses to go around for that big a communion. So my dad, there was not a drop of water in the sacristy, cold or hot, not a drop. So my dad hauled up a pail of hot water, and they made a pan of sudsy water, rinsed water, and gave me a towel, and I had to wipe the towel out, the glass out, and then put it in the tray for the next table. And my mom would say, hurry, hurry, hurry. It's time for the next table, And so now, the altar guild does that kind of work. But they at least don't have to wash the glasses. But it's just, okay. My mom washed the baptismal towels. There were only 2 baptismal towels, but she washed and ironed those, and they hung them somewhere here. And we didn't give the baptismal towels away like they do now. We just had 2 cloth baptismal towels. Now, the altar guild, okay, when past the altar, we didn't have an altar guild when I tell you what I just told you. So Pastor Bo came and he started the altar guild. Now my mom was wondering why she hadn't been doing enough job, that they needed a whole bunch of ladies to do it. But the Altar Guild is a marvelous organization, and they really work hard. And when they have communion and take it out to the lawn, it's hard work, and they change the banners and they change the colors for everything that they do for a Sunday. We really appreciate it. You tell them that, because I really appreciate them. And I know that my mom loved to do this work, but that's when they changed it and had the Altar Guild. But I'm sure it took a little while to get it started, But she loved doing it, and I love doing the glasses. But okay, now, so we got that done. Now we are, okay. Oh, the Paschal candle. Okay, that's hard to explain. The Paschal candle has a design on it. It's beautiful. I don't know if it's here today or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Paschal candle has a Greek alphabet on it, like A, and the upside down U, and the middle design is too hard for me to explain. I don't understand it. And so it is the Alpha and Omega of Jesus Christ. He is the beginning and the ending, the Alpha and Omega. We even sing about that in a hymn, the beginning and the ending. Now this Paschal candle, and maybe I'm not right, but it's near the altar at Easter time. And it is at the baptismal font during a baptism. And it is by the body during a funeral. So pay attention to that. I think that's right. I'm not going to ask Pastor about it. I think it's right. And so that Paschal candle is beautiful. And then I'm just adding this now. My sister, when she died, they bought a beautiful cross in memory of everybody, I guess. And that usually stands here at something special. And I love it when they carry that cross down the aisle and have that belong to my sister, okay? Now, we're coming to the pulpit. I guess I'll change sides. Okay. See, they had stools for me and everything. I can sit down, but I'm okay. The pulpit is not old. That pulpit was given to the church in memory of, it was given by the Oscar Twido family because it was in memory of Ron Twido, who was killed during World War II. We just have to remember that. He was killed during World War II. Okay, and so now we had an old pulpit. This is the new one that they bought in 1948. Now we had an old pulpit that was there. Now can you tell me where that is? If you know, I think some of you know, shout it out. Where is it up here? A baptismal font. Wonderful. It is, we had a wonderful carpenter here in Chris Nelson. So they asked Chris if he could make a baptismal font out of that old pulpit. So there it is. He made that baptismal font. Now, the old baptismal font, which was looking like marble, that's down in the chapel, and it will be in the museum, and some of you were baptized in it, with it, or however you do that. And so and my children were baptized in the new one, so that has to be, I don't know how many years, but That's what that is now, is a beautiful bed. And you see the wood looks just alike, so the old pulpit must have been like that too, because that's what they made out of it. Unless they did some finagling with it, I don't know. Okay. Now, let's see. Yep, okay, thank you very much. The organ, the choir loft, that room, the console, we have to talk about all of that. So if you're game, here I go. Now, these organ pipes on this side are fake. This one on the south is fake. Now there's another one that matches it. Underneath it was beautiful silver. When that is another one up there, just like that. And those big ones don't work, they are fake. But this beautiful new thing, that was done in 2002. And those are real pipes, and they're beautiful pipes. Okay, now, these big pipes that are fake were gold. And the 2002, the organ builder wanted to put these silver pipes up there because they're beautiful. And so, what was his name? The guy that played the piano for us for contemporary, Bill Georgia, had a garage, a big garage, and they took these pipes, they were gold then, out to his garage, and several of us went out and painted them silver. So at least they wouldn't look so bad here with this one. So the new one. So we see we have people working with us all the time that you didn't even know about. So then the organ builder in 2002 did a lot of things. He put 500 new pipes in the organ. And so he's not really, you don't really have an organ builder here for this, because the organ this organ was original with this church, and a pipe organ never wears out. But it does need some help. And so that's what these other organ builders were doing, helping them out, adding more pipes, doing what they had to do. This room, with a cloth over it, was open. And that was the choir loft. And there were 4 pews in there. And I know some of you, as I do, remember coming out on the steps to sing our anthem. And there were several of you, I bet, that remember that. So that room was open. And the console for the organ was right below it. And the organ bench had a little green cloth around it because it was fixed so that we couldn't watch the organist's pedals feet when he was playing the pedals. So, and that's kind of a well-known fact that we had the green cloth. Okay, but now they put the console for the organ back there, but also they bought a new console for the organ, so that's over there. So it's hard to tell all this. But now, then Chris Nelson came and built us this choir loft. And he made a stage for the piano and for a wheelchair and whatever. That was Chris's work. And then they had the 4 pews from up here. They brought them back here. And then I think because there were extra pews, they added another little section that can seat 4 choir people that goes out a little farther. Now, the reason we needed a wheelchair was, this is kind of a personal thing, but Pastor Bakke was injured during the war, World War II. And so he couldn't serve anymore. So he and his family moved here, and his 3 small children graduated from our high school over here. And he sang in the choir. He was a lovely singer and a pretty lovely man. And so for choir practice, we actually had high school boys singing in that choir. And so two of them would go down to the car and they'd get Pastor Baki and his in his wheelchair, bring it up to the aisle right here, and then they would stand on the back of it and whee! And Pastor Baki just loved it, you know. Well, they loved him, of course, and so now he was able to hang on to this pew right here, over there, and he could lift himself up and to sing. But it got so that he couldn't do it anymore. So he didn't want to sit down and sing, and I didn't want him to sit down and sing. So we went out to Kvetz and asked them if they could think of any way Pastor Baki could raise himself up so he could sing. Well, they made a metal piece like this, fit over that, only up in the choir loft. And then they welded a 2-foot pipe onto that, and they put it in front of his wheelchair, and Willie could grab a hold, and Pastor Baki could grab a hold of that and pull himself up. It was really a wonderful thing to do for him. And the kids loved him, so it went very well. Now, you might see that little gizmo around here someplace, but I'll bet they can't figure out what it is when they do find it. But it probably is in that room right there. Now, the choir loft, okay, now the pipes are up here, and the organ is over here. Now they had to run hundreds of wires under there, under the choir loft, up to the keys, up to the pipes. It must have been quite a job. And in 2002, when we had it redone, he put, I guess I told you that, he put 500 new pipes in there. And Willie Skellinger was the custodian here, and she took pictures of the process of that. And that's in an album out in the narthex if you want to see that. It's really interesting. So then, let's see, Dennis, okay, Margaret Nepstead was the organist. Then Dennis Thompson helped her, and he even started in high school. Dennis, are you here? Yeah, he's over there. Okay, Denny, I'm talking about you. So then he helped Margaret, and they shared that job for a while. Then Margaret quit, so now Dennis is stuck with the organ. And he was doing that for about 5 years. We loved you, Dennis. And now we have Ruth Sheldon doing it. And so that's wonderful that we have people who can do it. Dennis came to me one day after the organ was finished, rebuilt, and he said, you know, I've got a singer on the organ and I can't get rid of it. It just stuck. And he said, I think I have to call the organ builder, or the organ tuner, and see what he says. So he did, and he came back to me and he said, well, we have to go up there and we have to find the pipe that's singing like that. And then you have to pull it out of its socket. And then you unscrew the bottom of it. And in there you will probably find part of a mosquito. Part of a mosquito. Making all this racket. So we removed this mosquito, and he put the pipe back together, and he put it in its socket. No noise anymore. It was fixed. That little mosquito caused all of that trouble. So, but now the next thing that happened, or when Dennis knows about this, of course, you can't touch organ pipes. They go out of tune immediately. So now this organ pipe, I think it was an E, Dennis, I keep thinking that, was completely out of pitch because he touched it. Now, when the organ tuner comes, he can't touch any of the pipes because they go out of tune. So he has to use a screwdriver to touch the pipe, and then he finds out how out of tune it is, and then he can fix it. I don't know how he does that without his hands, but he can't use it. Or else maybe he just does it and lets them all go out of tune. I don't know, but I suppose that could be possible. So now, well, it's quit singing, but now he has touched it with his hands. This pipe has been pulled out and touched with his hands, and it's completely out of tune. And so it takes maybe overnight, at least, for it to just sit there and return to its pitch. And you know, the next day, I don't know how many hours it takes, that pipe has gone back to its original pitch exactly where it was before we touched it, by itself. Now that is a miracle. To me, it is a miracle. So that's kind of fun to think about. But now I think Ruth is here, but I haven't heard any noise lately by mosquitoes. So interesting though. That little mosquito, part of a mosquito, could cause that trouble. Okay, now, let's see. Oh, the old organ. Oh, yeah, okay. The old organ. Okay. I got to deviate a little bit and tell about your pictures then. Down in the basement, when you go down for coffee, there's stacks of pictures down there. And Merlin's put that together for us. And they came from Weva Sorensen, who I knew in choir years ago, and she found this stuff in the Galena, Illinois antique place, and she brought a copy to me to see of the old church. Well, this old church. There was a church here, and there's some evidence of it. And then the architect took a lot of things out of that old church to use here. One of them is the organ at school in the balcony. You've gone to school and you've seen that. And we had a little concert on it 3 years ago. It still works. Been here since they built this church. And so that, let's see now. No, there are other things too. There's the clock downstairs. There were pews that we can see in that picture down. And so he has made enough pictures so you can help yourself if you want. Picture of the old church before this was built. And that architect took all kinds of things over here. But I remember when I was in junior high, I mean that's a long time ago, that those pipes were stored in the 1900 building, which is down now, but it was stored, they were stored over there. And when we remodeled the auditorium at the school back in 85, 90, right in there, I'm going to have a senior moment here. That you can't help me? Okay. Well, anyway, we'll just let that go, but it's kind of interesting stuff, I suppose. What did you find?
I can't help you.
Okay.
You're talking about the school?
Yeah, I was.
You don't have any more down there?
No, I don't have anything down there.
Anyway, was fixed down from the end of Oregon.
Well, anyway, that's right, he was. And so then we had a couple guys, I see I'm just deviating a little bit here, but it's kind of interesting. A couple of guys, Mr. Wirt and Mr. Mortensen, who were working in that building, and they needed to talk to the architect because they'd drill a thing, and they'd say, I wonder what's behind this wall. And so they needed to talk to the architect. He was the same one that did the building here, Mr. Thorson. So he, oh, well, no, I'm getting off the track on that.
You called it down and called over.
Yeah. I called over to Waldorf and asked him for the phone number of Mr. Thorson. And while I called them, this secretary said, well, Mr. Thorson and his son are here right now. Do you want to talk to them? I said, whoa, really? Yeah, I do. Well, I didn't know what to say, of course. I was so excited about it. And so, but I didn't have to worry because he talked to me. He was Mr. Thorson, was just wonderful. And then he died later on, shortly after that, and I had talked to his son, so I talked to him again after his dad died, and he said that they had found a boulder on the farm. It was about 3 feet high, a smooth boulder, and he hauled it over to the cemetery on the highway, and he had a sandblaster come and put all the information on it. And Floyd and I were so curious about that. We drove over to the cemetery to find it, and there is Mr. Thorson under the boulder. It was just, he laid to rest there. It was just a beautiful thing to do for him. So that's where our architect is. Now, we're gonna, oh, the bell. Okay, but before that, I have to say a couple more things. I don't have it down, written there. Okay. Okay. Over under that, you see that beam? Well, it's a roof over it. There are 12 boards up there. I think you can see them. You can count them if you want them, but there are 12 there. Over here, over the all loft, there are 11 only. And that's Mr. Thorson's symbol that the work of the church is never done. So we got a lot of work left to do. Now these chandeliers above us have been here since from the beginning of this church. But they were out of money and they needed these chandeliers. And Pastor Sletton was the pastor here during the building of this church. And so he went to the Ladies' Aid, which is welcome now, you know, but he went to Ladies' Aid. And he said, could you raise $225 to buy these chandeliers? That's what I've heard tell anyway. And you can wonder if they made it work, but look, they were here. So I must have made it work. So now we have that symbol, this, and now just can I talk about the bell? Okay. We're getting to almost the end. Okay, now there is a bell in the belfry. My dad took me, when I was in high school, my dad took me everywhere. I got to go into the tower, got to go up into the bells, or the organ. To the furnace, I saw everything here. So I've seen it a lot. But anyway, the bell. Now, it is a very important bell because it's up in the tower and it's a big, beautiful bell. And there's a big, thick rope, very thick. And it's hanging straight down the wall and the bottom of it is in the stairway going up to the belfry, balcony. So why that's important is that bell was rung for every single event that ever happened in this church. Half hour before and right at the event time. So my dad taught us how to ring the bell because you can't just ding-dong it. You have to go ding-dong and hold it down. Ding-dong and hold it down. And so he taught all of us how to ring the bell. And you know, because it had to be rung a half hour before, Luther League, meetings, anything, it was rung. So it just was a neat thing to have done. And with the chant around our house, because we just lived across the street, was who's ringing the bell? And then one of us would come over and ring the bell. A lot of times it got to be me and I wanted it to get me. I loved to ring the bell. Well, It must have been towards Easter time. And I had 3 trumpeters here to practice for Easter. And it was nighttime. And it was decent weather out, nice, beautiful sky. And they came and practiced with me. And then I sent them on their way. I said, well, you're good enough, let's call it quits. And they left, and I was here. I took my straighten up, and then took my music and walked out and turned the lights off, walked down the dark stairway, went outside, heard the bell. So here these guys had hidden in that stairway until I'd gone high, and then they rang the bell. Well, I'm just astounded. But they were coming bursting out of the door, just laughing their heads off. Thought that was the funniest thing in the world. It was pretty funny when you think about it. So now I want to say that this church, we are so proud of it. We're so proud of the effort that these people made and the sacrifices they made for us to leave us this beautiful place. But they're no different from us. We have been responsible for the mission of this church for 100 years. Now, it doesn't look too bad. We've taken care of it. And now we are going to be responsible for the mission of this church for another 100 years. And it's just a wonderful thing to think about. When we need a furnace, we're going to get a furnace. Right? We always get what we need. Thank you very much for listening. Nice of you to come and to listen. I appreciate it so much. I love this place. I think I told you that it was, yes. Oh, you're here.
Because you told me to be here.
Okay.
And Virginia wanted to open it up for any questions.
Yeah.
If anybody had a question, she wanted to be able to ask. And there was going to be some people who want to share some stories too. We know at least a couple people. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Virginia?
They have to have a microphone.
Okay, Virginia, I was wondering, you said about Pastor Bakke,
Yes.
I don't think he was injured in the war.
He was sick.
He was going on be out on this ship that was later destroyed, but he got MS and got frozen and couldn't move. So they took him off the ship, and he told me he figured that was God saving his life, because everybody on that
Isn't that interesting?
ship was destroyed. And I thought, he had such a good heart, and he enjoyed himself, and he loved to speak.
Yep.
And he loved to talk, and
Yes,
he liked to talk to people. He liked to go out and eat, and of course,
Everybody loved him.
and I know Jim Tweeten was very, very good to him.
Yeah.
He would take him out, and because it took a big man to handle him, and he had a van, and
Yeah.
Jim Tweeten would drive his van.
Yep.
But I can remember all the stuff that you're telling about. Of course, I'm not quite as old as you, but I have a lot of memories of Salem.
There isn't anybody here as old as I am, so you don't have to worry. I
Thank
know 2 people that are older than I am, but they're not here. But they're...
That's what's so fun about these conversations. Just get them, they're fuller. Yeah. Any other questions before we
Oh,
have
yeah.
a couple more people who want to share?
They can share a story too,
I thought at one time, I mean, I remember sitting in choir and somebody told us there was a symbol for all those little black dots up in the windows.
Yeah.
And then maybe it was just Kathy telling us as our choir director, so we'd sit here and count them during choir and behave.
I didn't hear it.
There's a whole bunch of black dots.
Oh, yeah, I don't know about them.
I wonder, somebody said that there's a one on number one up there, on numbered on each of those.
People have
I
asked,
haven't figured it out yet.
maybe they're screws.
They're really theological.
Where were the windows made? Do you know? Where the windows were made? What kind of glass or the company?
Was
or-
somebody saw the windows, that is Diane Clark here? No. She knew a patient that remembered them coming on the wagon from the railroad to the church. It must have been something to see them come.
I'll say, stay tuned.
I think they used, I was told that they used, to get them there, they used logs and rolled them.
The windows?
Logs.
The windows?
Yeah, the windows. And I don't know if they came in, I'm pretty sure they had to come in one piece.
Oh, yeah.
And, but that's what I was told, you know.
We'll
My
find-
grandfather was very
We're going to
interested in
find
this
out some
church.
of that when they work,
So
when they work
anybody
in the
else
safe
know?
now.
Any other questions? So you had a story you wanted to tell also, Doris? Why don't you? Then we have Fern too.
Faith.
Well, I was just going to tell about the men that started this church. I was told, and this was taken from Leroy Moe's book he wrote about his grandfather and his family. And he tells about that 5 people, and it was farmers and businessmen that mortgaged their farm and businesses. And my grandfather had heard the church was going, the bank was going to close because they didn't have any money. And things were really hard. And he went to the banker, into the bank, and the banker told him, the bank has plenty of money. Don't worry. He said, my grandfather went home, and later that day, somebody came riding up in a buggy and told him the bank had closed. So my grandfather lost his farm. And he was very disgusted. And he always said that the banker wasn't truthful. He never called him a liar. But it was quite devastating to him because he had a really big family. And I've got the book here. If anybody wants to see it, I'll take it downstairs. And they show the kind of a tractor that my grandfather first had. And when he got rid of this, so he didn't have to use his horses. And then it tells by the end of the time in this book that he had gone from plowing with horses and cutting trees down and dynamiting the roots up so he could get enough farmland so he could support his family. And he had altogether, they weren't all home at the same time, but there were 14 children, and one died of diphtheria. And he was really interested in this church, and he made sure like told me about this when I was a kid, and he borrowed $1,000. And that's quite a lot of money in that amount of time. And I don't know who the businessmen were. I called my relatives that I could get a hold of, and nobody seemed to know who they were or what kind of business they had. But I understood there were 3 farmers and 2 businessmen, but it's not for certain. But I think how many of us would borrow enough money now, you know, even as affluent as a lot of people are, how many would borrow money? So you have to give these pioneers credit for doing this, or we wouldn't have had this beautiful church that is so beautifully designed. And my grandpa was really proud of these windows.
Can you give that to Fee, that microphone?
And he always would tell us, you should look when the sun is just in a certain place, the beautiful glow it sends out. And it's really true. These windows, this window up here really lights up.
Would you give
And,
them Doris,
But I
would you-
just thought it
Give
would
that
be
to Fay.
interesting. There's 2
okay.
of the Mole family here, myself and my niece Sharon, sitting out there. And she's a great grandchild of my Grandpa Mole.
Go ahead. Doris, you want us?
There you go. It should be right now. Try it.
I have 2 stories to tell. One is Don's dad, C. Oscar Ahmet, was a single man living down by Joyce, and he was to be married in 1920. So when this church was built, he was single, and he sold 3 of his prime milking cows and gave the money to the building of this church. The other story I have is in 1921, this church was dedicated. My mother was 11 years old, and she and her family lived down by Joyce. And her dad said to his wife one day, "Jewel, I think we should go up to Lake Mills to the dedication of the new church on Sunday." "Oh," she said, "that would be fine, but I will need to go to town and buy a new hat before Sunday." So Sunday came, and they came here to the dedication of this church. They sat over by the north wall towards the back. It was my mother, about 11, and a sister who was about 8, and a couple other siblings and her parents. They walked into this church and they couldn't believe it. They had never, ever seen anything so large and so beautiful. But there was a lady who sat in front of them that had a big hat. And this hat got in the way. These kids wanted to see what was all around the windows and the ceilings and everything, but the hat got in the way. So they would move a little bit in their pew, but then the lady would move a little bit in her pew, and so the hat was an obstruction, and it made the kids very unhappy. But she said it was a marvelous day. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was just, they were in awe. And I think we can be proud of this building, that our pioneers had the vision that they had. I often wonder why these immigrants felt as though they needed to build a church like this when they came from Norway and had very simple stave churches.
Thanks, Fay.
Thank you. We'll probably hear more about this during the year, so just keep your stories. Thanks for coming. And there's coffee, cookies, whatever else downstairs. Go feast.
Talk about the pictures again.
Pardon?
The pictures again.
Yeah, a picture, okay. Downstairs in the round table, we've copied a few pictures, actually two. One is a postcard. The postcard came from Weva Sorensen used to be. And the other one I found in a book myself. And there I made 50 copies of it. Maybe I should make more. So help yourself. We run out and we'll get some more made. Not today, but another day. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done?